Good morning, dear colleagues and comrades and friends, to the second day of our conference on the situation of the health systems in Greece and Europe. We are very happy that you made it on the Sunday morning to come again to the conference. It was a very exciting, very interesting day yesterday with many interesting discussions about the situation of the public health in Greece. We were focusing on labor rights, on the situation in the institutions, on the lack of funding, on strategies of alternatives, the problems of privatization, mainly focused on the situation here in Greece. Today we want to continue the conference with a second panel. The topic will be the European perspectives of the public health, the European framework, which is also important, of course, for the situation here in Greece, but we want to also to show some examples of struggles for the free public health in other European countries, which could be interesting, maybe also for the situation here in Greece. For that reason, I am very happy to welcome our guests today. Nadja Rakovits, my colleague from Germany, will coordinate the panel. Nadja is the coordinator or the executive general secretary, let's say, of the Union of Democratic Doctors in Germany. She's also a member of the Scientific Council of the Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung in Berlin. So we are very happy that she's here. Nadja is working on the topic of public health in Greece for many years. Even she moved partly to Piraeus because she loves also the country. So she has the experience also from the anti-austerity struggles 10 years ago and followed very intensively what is happening here, but Nadja also knows very well what is happening in Germany and on the European level. So thank you very much. I give the word now to Nadja, who will present our guests and also the topics we will talk about.
Okay. Thank you, Evaristo, Boris. Kalimera σας. Good morning for this second day of our event. At the table here, sitting left of me, right from you, Anna Bacia from Poland. I will introduce them when they make their input. Then Anna Vracha from Croatia, and on the left, Alan Sable from Switzerland. On the right here is Andreas Xanthos.
May I just put it down? Because
Yeah.
we don't need it.
Yeah.
You don't need it, okay? So we can see you.
Signal me. Andreas Xanthos from Greece. So now you see everybody in the full beauty. And on the right, Dana Lützgendorf from Germany. We will talk, I'm sorry, you found on the program Yanis Saridakis. He apologizes for not being here because of private reasons, so Andreas will take his part. We will have 2 round-table discussions this morning, and at last a session with conclusions of the 2 days. We decided now, because it's 11 o'clock and not 10 o'clock, that we will make the 2 round table discussions together and will not make a break between. It will at least go until 1:30. You have coffee between, you can go outside and have a coffee, but we will do it together and make not the break, and the break will then be at 1:30 for coffee and for a little snack. The session will mostly be in English. We will speaking mostly English, so I'm taking the chance to say thank you to the translators who did a great job yesterday, and yesterday we forgot to thank them, so please make a little applause for the translators. Okay, thank you. So The first panel deals, as Boris said, with working conditions, labor migration, and brain drain. The second round we will make will deal with trade unionism and organizing in the trade unions. Due to poor working conditions, low wages or unemployment, healthcare professionals are often forced to emigrate to another country to work in a hospital or care facility. There are often new problems there. Recognition of the profession, the language, racism in the structures and among some colleagues. As far as I know from Germany, I don't know how it is here in Greece. Conditions are even more difficult for caretakers who work and live 24 hours, 7 days in the family of the person being cared for, often under illegal conditions. The huge poverty gap in Europe is the soil on which this brain drain is growing. How can we as leftists and trade unionists deal with this problem? What left-wing European answers do we have? This is the issue for the first panel. So the first I'm asking is Anna Vracha from Croatia. Anna, you are a member of BRIT, the Basis for Workers' Initiative and Democratization in Croatia, and you're a member of the People's Health Movement as well. You are a cultural anthropologist, as far as I know.
I am.
Okay, and many, many other things more. So, Anna, in an interview about your work with the Base Workers' Initiative and Democratization, you talk about women from the countries of Yugoslavia who go to the rest of Europe to look after and care for elderly people in their private homes. They are, in general, initiatives to organize and network these workers. What are you doing in this field? Which organizations in other countries do you work with in this regard? How do you manage to contact and organize the care workers? The vast majority of them are women and work in private surroundings, so it's quite difficult to get in contact with them. On the other side, you talk about people who migrate to Croatia. Do they also work in the healthcare sector? How do you support these colleagues in organizing? Do such improvements amount to merely lubricating the system, or can the system be transformed from within with your work? What is your perspective?
Okay, hi everyone, good morning, and thank you for inviting me here. I'm really glad to be here and to hear and learn more about the situation in the Greek health system. I think it's it has very many similarities, I find, with the Croatian health system, especially when it comes to migration. And then just for, to make this a bit more concise and short, I'm going to try to break it down in like 3 groups, broad groups of migrant workers that we are either working with in BRIT, or we are trying to set up international initiatives to support them. So first, of course, is the group that you mentioned, Nadia. It's the health and care workers who migrated after socialism, and that's essentially something that I think we share with a lot of countries in Eastern Europe. So what the experience here was that either because of privatization in the health system, so falling labor conditions, more pressure, more workload, or because of course, health conditions. So health workers, especially nurses, especially assistants who could not work anymore, they retired, and then they couldn't live on the pensions that they were given. And then they started emigrating to Western Europe, in some cases also to South Europe, for example, in Italy, because of the geographical proximity, of course. And then they continued to work as care workers, informal care workers, or assistants, care workers who live with the families at home and provide 24 o'clock care. So with these workers, of course, okay, so one thing to add maybe is that these are not all trained health workers. So a big part of this group is essentially people who have worked in factories, who have worked in the industry, but after the industry collapsed, they were forced to find other jobs. Since no other jobs were available at home, they were forced to take informal care work elsewhere. And so this is something that, as I said, I find from international discussions that we have had, we share with a lot of countries in the region. So what we do is, in this regard, is we work through the People's Health Movement, and this is an initiative that we are still trying to launch a bit more intensively. But essentially, the idea is to connect the migrant workers from different countries, from the country where they live to the country where they are going to migrate. So the idea is that we have both grassroots organizations providing education about trade unions, about labor conditions that can be expected in the countries where they migrate. So it can be the UK, it can be Germany, it can be France, it can be whatever. But with the perspective that we can connect them to someone in those countries so they can reach out if they decide to migrate. And so that's essentially something that we have been working on for quite a bit of time, I will be fair. But it's something that it is a bit complicated to do because we are not exclusively trade unions in this sector. So it takes a bit of, intersectional dialogue and cooperation to get things going and to actually understand how we can support each other and what each organization can do. So this kind of migration that happened in Croatia, of course, had devastating impacts on the health system. And again, I think that judging from the presentations that we heard yesterday, there are overwhelming similarities with what happened here. So we are not yet at the point where we can say the hospitals are not staffed, but we can definitely say that health centers, primary health centers, especially in the rural regions, so in the mountain area, on the islands, they cannot find doctors, even though they can publish tenders every 2 months. The same goes for nurses. The same also applies to some category of health workers in cities. And these are primarily nurses. So nurses, if you look at the job listings that are done, primary health centers, which are still public, they cannot recruit enough nurses to guarantee adequate staffing. So this is something that's likely going to evolve because we are not seeing any action whatsoever in terms of improving working conditions. And here I'm not just talking about salaries. Salaries are criminally low, but it's also about the workload. It's also about the expectations. It's also about what the health workers are being told that the health system should do, so what they're expected to do. And so this kind of brings us to the second point, and this is a migration to Croatia, which is a very new thing to be happening, to be honest. So it's something that was quite unusual because Croatia for a very long time was the place where people left from, not where people wanted to come in any way. So people who came to Croatia came with the exclusive intention to move on forwards. So, not an option. We saw that changing, unfortunately, lately. And I think it's one of the indicators of how bad conditions and the situation is getting elsewhere. So if someone is migrating to Croatia to work as a gig worker, if they're moving there to work as a construction worker, as an industrial worker, so these are all jobs that were impossible to fill by the local workers. Nobody wanted to do that. People rather opted to go elsewhere themselves rather than take those jobs. And now how employers are dealing with it, they're pressuring the government to increase the immigration quotas, and essentially they're not doing nothing to improve the conditions for the workers, but they're just bringing people who have to work in the conditions that they force upon them. The care sector, I would say, is new. In these new conditions, it's also new to see migrant care workers from the Global South coming in. We did have previous experiences of people from other Yugoslav countries coming to work in healthcare, but this is regional migration, and okay, we don't have to lose too much time on that, but essentially this is something that happened before. What we are seeing now in care, and this is something that we have noticed increasingly in public elderly care, this is a segment of the social security system that has been underfunded for years. So if the healthcare system has been ignored, it has been put on the back burner since the 1990s, the social security system is even lower than that. So if you look, we have nurses who are employed in the hospitals and nurses who are employed in the elderly care system, and their pay in the elderly homes is, I won't quote the number, but it's significantly lower than those who are employed in the healthcare system. So once you get the situation where you're missing nurses overall, then you have tenders in the hospitals and in the healthcare system, and then you have tenders in the social security system. It's impossible to find someone who will come to do that work. And so the administration of the homes is getting a bit creative. Some are able to snatch each other's workers, so that's, that works for them. Others, on the other hand, have also decided to focus more on migration. And so this is something that we are still seeing rolling out. It's a worrying situation because, as I said, since the only jobs that employers were recruiting for migrant workers were the worst jobs that there were, it kind of indicates how bad the situation in care is. So if you cannot get anyone to work there, it's past time to actually reframe the whole thing. And then we come to the third group, who is a group that actually could maybe make some kind of turn. And this is the group that we have mostly been working with over the past couple of years, a bit more maybe. And these are the students, but not the students at the universities, the students in high school. I think that so the education system for nurses and for physiotherapists is maybe a bit similar to Germany, because they can train at high school level, and then they can go to work, or they can go to university if they choose to do. So what we're seeing now, especially since Croatia became an EU member, is that people pick those high schools because they want to migrate. So you have classes and classes of nurses being enrolled, but nobody wants to stay. So essentially it's a career path, and your career path starts when you're 14, and you say, I'm going to now go to a nursing school because when I'm 19, I'm going to leave. And so this is something that previously was seen in medical schools. So people who would aspire to become doctors, and they come into the first year and they say, okay, I'm picking up Swedish because no way I'm going to stay here. And the no way I'm going to stay here is again because of the working conditions that they know they're going to meet. There has been a lot of privatization which has maybe gone under the radar, but it definitely has happened. So, you still have good public options that you can find around Croatia. There are strong public hospitals, there are community health centers that are public. But overwhelmingly, primary healthcare has been taken over by the private, because during the 90s, doctors were made from public sector employees into entrepreneurs. So if you remember what you talked about yesterday, it really rang a bell because we had the same process. So like already in the 30s and 40s, there was a strong push to make doctors employees. And then you had them as employees during Yugoslavia, during socialism. And then in the 90s, you had the other way, the push to push them back into the private. And what's interesting is that they oppose both things. So previously, they were against the fact that they were being forced into the public sector because they didn't understand why. Why would we do this? We want to make money. Then they found out that it actually worked pretty well. So, they had good conditions. They worked in a team. They were provided with all the support that they were needed. And then when the 90s came, many of them said, no, well, we don't want to go back to the private, but they were forced to do it. And now, 30 years later, they like it. So it's financially a very good thing if you can be a GP and have like a concession-based practice. So in this context, the vocational students, they're trying to leave. On the other hand, they're also interested to hear what can be done locally. So what we're doing here is we launched, it's kind of an education course, but we do it with schools. So we go at school in the classroom, and then we teach them about trade unions. We have a discussion about what trade unions are. What do trade unions do? Why do they, why? Why? It's interesting because it's the only thing that they hear about it. So you have formally like a civic education curricula, but it's about entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. It's not about preparing people to essentially go and have a job. So it's very interesting to meet with them and to essentially see how they reflect upon this. And what we hear is that they actually pick it up very easily. It's not like, especially for the students who have someone in their family who is still a trade union member, they're really ready to engage with the discussion. And that's interesting because we did get a couple of people feeding back to us and staying involved in the activities that we do in PHM through this kind of work. So it's a very good thing, to connect with people when they're quite young. They're 18 at the point when we talk to them. And it also reflects on what we can do and plan in the future.
Okay, thank you very much, Anna. I suggest that we make the questions after the round here on the table. So the next one I'm asking is Alan. Alan, you are head of department of Unicare, Uniglobal Union, based in Switzerland. Unicare's sector is uniting private care workers all over the world. Together with its affiliate unions, Unicare supports organizing workers and building a fairer care sector with dignity, decent wages, stronger unions, and safer working conditions. The huge poverty gap in Europe is the soil on which brain drain, especially in the care sector, is growing. How do you deal with this problem? How can you criticize the brain drain from the left without wanting to infringe on the individual right of freedom of movement? What left-wing European answers do we have?
Thank you. Just for a little bit of background, and thank you to Rosa Luxemburg for inviting us here, and for Anna. It's a really wonderful event. I've learned a lot, especially the conversations yesterday from hearing some of the problems in Greece are very similar, unfortunately, to things that we are seeing around the world. As Nadia mentioned, UNI is a global union federation of the services sector. We represent unions from around the world with about 20 million members total, and about 4 million of those are in the health and care sector. I think when we talk about migrant care workers and brain drain, we need to understand the context, which is a staffing crisis in the care sector that is global. And it's in Europe, it's in Africa, it's in Asia, it's in Latin America. And I want to read one quote from a survey that we did recently to show a little bit about what that means when we talk about a care crisis. So a woman said, who works at an aged care facility in Belgium, I have 9 minutes to take care of a human. That means bathing, dressing, styling, brushing. And then I have 30 minutes to feed breakfast to 10 people. That's the position we're putting care workers in with the short staffing crisis. But we need to understand what the root of that is. So as I mentioned, we recently did a survey of over 11,000 workers in 63 countries. And one of the most surprising things was the problems that we found were very similar, whether they were in wealthy countries or low-income countries, whether it was in North America or Southern Africa. And the overwhelming problem was short staffing. Nearly 70% of health and care workers across the 63 countries said they are regularly short-staffed, with 36% saying they always work short-staffed. Now, that's driving people to see care work as not sustainable until retirement age. So over half of the respondents said that their career is not sustainable until retirement age. And among the next generation of care workers aged 18 to 34, 65% said their career is not sustainable until retirement age. And so that's one of the myths that we need to change when we talk about the staffing crisis. There is not a shortage of care workers. There's a shortage of care workers that are willing to work under the current conditions. And it's the conditions that are driving people out. So we found that among the very small percent of workers who said that they never work short-staffed, 71.5% of them said that they see their career as sustainable. Whereas for those who said that they often or always work short-staffed, that number falls from 71.5 to 43%. And it's not just short staffing. Low wages, the same correlation. 62% of healthcare workers say they are unsatisfied or very unsatisfied with their compensation, with only 1.7% saying they're very satisfied. That's another thing driving people out. Violence and harassment. 86.2% of workers have experienced or witnessed harassment, violence, or discrimination on the job. And more than a third, 37% of respondents report experiencing or witnessing violence and harassment at least monthly. That is not a sustainable job, and that is driving people out and creating the crisis. Only 2 in 5 workers say they feel safe. Now, when we talk to governments and employers, their solution to this staffing crisis is, okay, we're going to bring more workers in from other countries. And even some of the, like Croatia, you have a country that's sending people abroad at the same time that they're recruiting people from other countries. But those migrants have the same experience or worse. They have experienced higher levels of discrimination and harassment, higher levels of violence and harassment, are faced with the same problems of short staffing. So 2 out of 5 migrant workers also say they don't consider their job sustainable until retirement. So it is not sustainable to keep, whether it's recruiting new workers, training new workers, or bringing workers in from abroad, to bring them in a system that creates huge physical and mental health problems and drives them out of the sector is just a revolving door. One of the positive things we saw is that union members were significantly more likely than non-union members to say that their career is sustainable until retirement. And not surprisingly, that's because union members had said that they were more satisfied with their working conditions, had better staffing. Doesn't mean that they have good staffing, but that it was better than non-unions because they have a seat at the table to advocate for better conditions. But ultimately, we need to make the case to governments that they have to invest more into care systems. The only way to solve the staffing crisis is through more investment with better staffing, better pay, the ability to collectively bargain, and violence and harassment prevention. And part of that also means, so UNI's strategy around this is twofold. One part is we are actively organizing unions in sending countries in order to raise the standard of care. So, for example, our affiliate in Zimbabwe, 2 years ago, they lost 50% of their membership to people traveling abroad. When we started organizing, just in the first 3 months of the campaign, they were able to recruit 200 new members and sustain those members because while conditions have only improved slightly, workers feel part of a plan to make improvements. They feel hopeful in a way that they hadn't been before. They don't want, a lot of workers, they don't want to leave, but they just don't see a sustainable path at home. And when they feel part of a movement that's fighting at home to make things better, they're more likely to stay. And so we need to organize in sending countries and build strong unions to improve working conditions in sending countries. But we also need to, there will always be some people, as you said, who choose to migrate, and we need to ensure that bilateral migration agreements do not discriminate against and set up situations where migrant workers have less rights than non-migrant workers. And there are best practices. I'll just cite one example from Australia. Australia has an aged care visa program that in order for employers to access those workers, they have to sign a memorandum of understanding with a union that provides that the union will have access to meet with workers, both the migrant workers and the non-migrant workers. The employer agrees to take a neutral stance against unions, so they won't try and scare people or intimidate people from joining the union, and that all staff have the opportunity to meet with the union on paid time to make a decision for themselves whether they join a union. That, combined with a path for permanency and family reunification, I think is one of the best examples where we can make sure that when workers do migrate, that their rights are defended and that they become part of a movement to improve care conditions for everyone, migrant and non-migrant.
Thank you very much, Alan. I think we will talk about more in the next round. Anyway, okay, Anna Bhatia, you're a nurse, you're a unionist, you're president of the Trade Union for Nurses of the OPZZKP, and you're a member of the Uniglobal Union as well. What's the situation in Poland? Are there enough local healthcare professionals? Where do the migrants in the healthcare sector came from? What experience do they have in Poland? Where do Poles go when they migrate to other countries? For example, many Polish women work in 24-hour care in neighboring countries, for example, in Germany, sometimes under highly problematic labor law conditions. How is this discussed in Poland, and what demands are there in Poland on this regard, for example, for Germany, when we in Germany get your nurses?
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm happy to have this possibility to share my experience and hear your experiences as well. So in Poland, we have a still unstable situation, and it's similar like in Croatia and in other countries, like you said before. Our local healthcare workers go abroad. They migrate to the countries in the West. So we are still short staffing, and the ones with diploma, like doctors or nurses, they go to live permanently, for example, in Germany, because it's the closest country. So it's easy and it's very often. And caregivers are going to take care of elderly people in this way, like 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Then they stay for 1 month, go back, and then again. So a few years ago, the gap becomes bigger and bigger. But since the war in Ukraine started, the gap is no more in care sector, and it's not good, as you can see, because it's the chance for the trade union when you have this gap and you can work more on making the working conditions better. You can press on employers because there's no one to work in care. But the Ukrainian people, they filled the gap, so they are like weakening the working conditions because they agree to work with minimum wage. That's obvious, yeah. So we have some law regulations in Poland, that medical staff is getting more money, so the wages are increasing every year because we have this in the law regulations, but it's only for medical staff and it's only for permanent contract. And what is the problem? That in the company when I work, it's AMAZE, like former Orpea, we have 1,200 workers and only 350 have permanent contracts. Others have only civil contracts. So when you have civil contract, it doesn't matter what you do because you are not medical staff, you can earn minimum wage. So private companies, like the one that I work in, use this cheap labor. I don't like this phrase, but that's the life. So they use this Ukrainian people, especially caregivers, pay minimum wage, and that's great for the company to make profits all the time. And we are in bad situation because our trade union is in a way is weakened by this situation. So what we and the other thing is that our medical staff is flowing from private sector to public sector because now it's better to work in hospital than in private nursing home. Mm-hmm. So that's the situation. So what we need is the stronger trade union and education among the migrants and taking care of them and find some solutions to make our union together with Polish workers and Ukrainian people and to make connections. And what Anna mentioned before, that it's important to connect also with these migrants from Poland, who are working in other countries. So I think it's a great challenge for the trade union and for other organizations to work together and to find good solutions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you. May I ask again? Are there any demands from the Polish trade unions to Germany or to German trade unions, especially on this 24/7 caretaking model, which is illegal in Germany and I think as well in Poland because of the working conditions?
Yeah, it's the same in Poland. Yeah. Mm. Our demands, that would be great if besides the law regulations, there would be a union and a union in German, and then we could cooperate the union in Poland. Mm-hmm. So I think the solution, that would be the great solution, because law regulations is the one thing, and when you don't, but you have to execute them, then you need the trade union to make things happen.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the next one is Dana Lützgendorf. Dana is a nurse in the Charité. She was a nurse at the Charité in Berlin, and now she is trade union secretary in Verdi. This is the trade union which is organizing the people in the public health sector, but in many more sectors as well. It's the second big union in Germany. So, Dana, there is a homemade shortage of skilled labor, as Alan said, for all over the world, a homemade shortage of skilled worker labor in the German health system. The German government is aggressively recruiting skilled labor for the healthcare sector in many countries around the world, for example, in Croatia, in Brazil, in Bosnia, in South America. Including in the countries of the former Yugoslavia. How is the trade union Verdi dealing with this politically? What experiences do these newly migrated colleagues have in hospitals and in nursing homes? And how does the trade union support the colleagues in these companies?
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for inviting me to this exciting conference in this beautiful island. Yeah, my name is Dana. I'm a nurse and worked over 20 years in Europe's largest university hospital, the Charité, on an intensive care unit. And now I'm a union secretary, you heard it. I'm one of those people who didn't want to work in nursing until retirement. I feel better about my health now and I sleep better. Yeah. I myself experienced how the working conditions deteriorated more and more due to the introduction of DRGs, the diagnostic related groups. I experienced how we were reduced to a skeleton staff and had to treat more patients in less time. The hospitals were supposed to become more efficient and save costs. For us, this meant a lot of stress, rushed work, and we went home exhausted. These were the reasons why we organized in Verdi at the Charité and fought and went on strike for a contract for more staff. That was my fight. That was in 2015. The collective labor agreement was still not satisfactory in the past, but Vergangenheit?
In the past.
Yeah, in the past. But more staff were being hired. However, it was also the time when it became noticeable in many hospitals that the reduction in the number of nursing staff was leaving its mark. Instead of taking measures to improve working conditions and to make nursing more attractive again in order to attract young people to the profession and to get colleagues back into the profession, they started looking for staff in Eastern Europe. The Charité has recruited a large number of staff from Albania, until the government has set standards for which countries staff may and may not be recruited from. Now we have many Mexicans and Filipinos. The proportion of foreign nursing staff is increasing. There are already wards where only foreign colleagues work and 2 or 3 Germans. This means that there are many challenges, and if they are not resolved, there will be consequences for everyone involved. This means that good integration concepts are needed, but they don't exist. The wave of migration wasn't well prepared, neither for the international colleagues nor for the local colleagues. This means the recognition of the professional license takes too long. The colleagues end up in an unhealthy relationship of dependency and are also underpaid until then because they have to work as a nursing assistant for so long. Mm-hmm. There are communication difficulties because often the language skills are not that good after all, and employers rarely offer courses to improve German language skills. The colleagues who come to Germany have a lack of knowledge about the health and social system, social studies, individual and collective labor rights, interest groups and trade unions. There are sometimes massive cultural differences that challenge both sides. All colleagues involved are not prepared for well enough for this. So far, there is no institution that offers this training satisfactorily. Mm-hmm. This is actually the employer's responsibility. And this naturally causes resentment in the teams. The prejudice arise or are confirmed. There are misunderstandings regarding certain behaviors in the respective culture, whether German or international. And on the top of that, there is a shift to the right and the actual hostility toward foreigners, which of course doesn't stop at the hospital door. Mm-hmm. Then there are the bad working conditions. This is not sufficiently conveyed in the recruitment process either. On the one hand, most international colleagues have a university degree and the specific task in their home country. Nurses in Germany perform many tasks that nurses assistants in other countries do. This doesn't make many colleagues happy. Then they have to look after many more patients in Germany because of the shortage of staff. They experience a lot of stress and have poor working conditions, and their work is undervalued. Many of them then continue on to Scandinavia or neighboring countries. Yeah, what we can do? Yeah, we can do, we have to organize better. We have to fight for better working conditions and nurse-to-patient ratios, because we have to be able to inspire young people who are already in our country to take up caring professions. Of course, everyone who comes to Germany voluntarily is welcome, but most are enticed with money because they need it for the family. Yeah, what hospitals can do? Furthermore, hospitals need to provide better training for everyone in the team, because even Germans have a lot to learn in order to work well in an international team. There is a gap. Employers should plan and more time for induction and offer finance language training during working hours. They should offer training during working hours on the health and social system, labor law, and politics. They should practice zero tolerance of experience of racism and implement better pay and working conditions. What union can do? For us, it is a challenge to gain access to our colleagues, as they feel as if they are in a relationship of dependency and should be grateful to their employer. They are sometimes afraid of getting involved. We need to empower our colleagues so that they can speak for themselves and also understand what their situation is not so good, and why, and also understand why their situation is not so good. And we need to strengthen them argumentatively so that they can act as multipliers among other international colleagues. In Verdi, a new 12-month seminar has been available for this since the beginning of this year. Strengthening of diversity among active members, among union volunteers and full-time officials should be, we need it. We need multilingual offers in counseling. We don't have. We should better understand and address the life situation of migrant colleagues in order to retain and represent them more effectively. We need let international colleagues speak for themselves and for their own solutions. We offer labor law seminars in simple German. Trade union activists in the company should mentor 1 or 2 international colleagues to introduce them to the culture and the trade union. Fight together for better working conditions and include the international colleagues' own concerns as demands. And yeah, there are many other things to do, but finally it's the beginning, almost too late, I guess. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dana. So last but not least, Andreas. You are a doctor in a hospital in Rethymno, and you were the health minister under the Syriza government, as everybody knows, I suppose. Since the huge economic crisis, especially since 2011, many people have left Greece to find work elsewhere. How many are we talking about, and how many have left the healthcare sector? What does this mean for the Greek healthcare system? How are the trade unions dealing with this? Are skilled workers coming from European countries in return? From where? Are there Greek women working abroad in 24-hour care? And where? Is there trade union protection for them, and vice versa? Are there workers, women from abroad, who work as 24-hour carers in Greece?
Λοιπόν, να σας καλημερίσω κι εγώ και να πω ότι όντως είναι μια εξαιρετική πρωτοβουλία αυτή των 2 Ινστιτούτων, του Ινστιτούτου 1 και του Ιδρύματος Ρόζα Λούξεμπουργκ, για να θέσουν σε δημόσιο διάλογο ένα πολύ κομβικό πρόβλημα για την ελληνική κοινωνία τουλάχιστον. Αλλά από ό,τι φαίνεται για όλες τις ευρωπαϊκές κοινωνίες. Την κατάσταση δηλαδή αποδιοργάνωσης των δημόσιων συστημάτων υγείας εξαιτίας ακριβώς μιας νεοφιλελεύθερης λογικής η οποία έχει εδραιωθεί τα τελευταία χρόνια. Και επιτρέψτε μου να πω επίσης εισαγωγικά ότι υπάρχει μια ιστορία στη σχέση με το Ρόζα Λούξεμπουργκ. Είναι το ίδρυμα με το οποίο η ριζοσπαστική και ανανεωτική αριστερά της χώρας μας είχε συστηματικούς δεσμούς και τα δύσκολα χρόνια της κρίσης, τότε που προσπαθούσαμε και δίναμε μια μάχη μέσα στην Ευρώπη για να σταθούμε όρθιοι και αξιοπρεπείς σαν χώρα, το Ρόζα Λούξεμπουργκ και το κόμμα της αριστεράς στη Γερμανία, του Die Linke, είχαν στηρίξει τις προσπάθειες αυτές και ο Χάραλντ Βάιμπεργκ, ο σύντροφος Χάραλντ, ήταν ο άνθρωπος ο οποίος είχε οργανώσει μια σημαντική παρουσία τότε αντιπροσωπείας του ΣΥΡΙΖΑ στο Βερολίνο και στην Ιρεμβέργη. Φτάσαμε να κάνουμε και διμερή συνάντηση στο Υπουργείο Υγείας της Γερμανίας το 2014 για να αναδείξουμε την υγειονομική τραγωδία τότε της χώρας μας με τους 2,5 εκατομμύρια ανασφάλιστους ανθρώπους θεσμικά αποκλεισμένους από ιατροφαρμακευτική περίθαλψη, για να αναδείξουμε τις πληγές της λιτότητας εκείνης περίοδου. Τώρα όμως έχουν περάσει πολλά χρόνια προφανώς, είμαστε σε άλλη φάση και νομίζω ότι το θέμα που συζητάμε σήμερα, η μετανάστευση εργατικού δυναμικού και ιδιαίτερα επιστημονικού δυναμικού και υγειονομικών, θεωρώ ότι είναι το σύμπτωμα. Η νόσος είναι η νεοφιλελεύθερη παγκοσμιοποίηση. Το σύμπτωμα λοιπόν είναι μπροστά μας, επηρεάζει ιδιαίτερα τις χώρες της Ευρώπης, τις πιο αδύναμες οικονομικά, οι οποίες ακριβώς σε μια περίοδο δημοσιονομικών περιορισμών και μέτρων λιτότητας συρρίκνωσαν το κοινωνικό κράτος και τα δημόσια συστήματα υγείας και δημιούργησαν αυτή την τρομερή κρίση στελέχωσης που σήμερα, ιδιαίτερα μετά την πανδημία, νομίζω ότι πια έχει πάρει δραματικές διαστάσεις στη χώρα μας. Θεωρώ λοιπόν ότι απαιτούνται προφανώς πολλά πράγματα. Υπάρχει το λενινιστικό ερώτημα τι να κάνουμε, αφού συμφωνούμε σε γενικές γραμμές στις διαπιστώσεις. Το πρώτο είναι ότι πρέπει να συνεχίσουμε να αγωνιζόμαστε. Πρέπει να συνεχίσουμε να οργανωνόμαστε, να υπάρχει μια δικτύωση, υπάρχουν καινούριες προκλήσεις προφανώς. Δεν μπορούν οι αγώνες, οι συνδικαλιστικοί, να έχουν στενά εθνικό ορίζοντα. Χρειάζεται μια πιο διεθνής, πιο ευρωπαϊκή τουλάχιστον οπτική και διασύνδεση για να ανατροφοδοτούμαστε με εμπειρίες, για να είμαστε πιο αποτελεσματικοί. Να ενισχυθεί αυτό που λέμε δηλαδή και στην Ελλάδα αυτόν τον καιρό, κοινωνική αντιπολίτευση. Να μην συμβιβαστούμε με αυτή την κατάσταση πλήρους αποσύνθεσης, διάλυσης, η οποία πραγματικά εξαντλεί τις ψυχοσωματικές αντοχές των ανθρώπων, επιβαρύνει τους ασθενείς, ρίχνει τα στάνταρς ασφαλείας στη λειτουργία του συστήματος και απαξιώνει στον πυρήνα της τη δημόσια περίθαλψη. Το δεύτερο που πρέπει να κάνουμε είναι, και αυτό νομίζω ότι είναι το ζήτημα της συζήτησης του διημέρου, είναι να αναζητήσουμε μια εναλλακτική στρατηγική. Και αυτό είναι δύσκολο. Ή μάλλον το πιο δύσκολο δεν είναι να βρούμε ποιοι είναι οι άξονες μιας εναλλακτικής στρατηγικής. Αυτοί νομίζω ότι εξαιρετικά έχουν παρουσιαστεί στη χθεσινή συζήτηση από τους συναδέλφους και πανεπιστημιακούς και εργαζόμενους του συστήματος υγείας, ακόμα και από τους εκπροσώπους των ασθενών. Το μεγάλο πρόβλημα και η μεγάλη δυσκολία και το μεγάλο αδιέξοδο, θα έλεγα, στο οποίο βρισκόμαστε σήμερα σαν χώρα, είναι ότι δεν υπάρχει ορατή πολιτική εναλλακτική διέξοδος. Η χθεσινή εικόνα, κατά την άποψή μου, όπου καλούνται θεσμικά από δύο Ινστιτούτα έστω της αριστεράς, για ένα θέμα τόσο κρίσιμης σημασίας, 7 κόμματα του ευρύτερου προοδευτικού χώρου, 7 πολιτικές δυνάμεις της Ελλάδας, να ορίσουν εκπρόσωπό τους και να έρθουν να πούν την άποψή τους και να μην καταδέχεται κανένας ουσιαστικά πλην της Νέας Αριστεράς και του ΣΥΡΙΖΑ να εκπροσωπηθεί, κατά την άποψή μου δείχνει το πολιτικό αδιέξοδο της συγκυρίας. Εάν δηλαδή οι πολιτικές δυνάμεις της χώρας δεν αισθάνονται την ανάγκη, έστω σε μια περιφερειακού τύπου, σε ένα φόρουμ που γίνεται στην περιφέρεια, να έρθουν και να πούν την άποψή τους, να ασκήσουν κριτική και στα πεπραγμένα και στα τωρινά και στα μελούμενα. Και απλώς, ας πούμε, ο καθένας οχυρώνεται πίσω από τη δική του αλήθεια και από τη δική του, τέλος πάντων, επαναστατική καθαρότητα, νομίζω ότι πραγματικά είμαστε πολύ κατώτεροι συνολικά ως πολιτικό σύστημα στις τραγικές ανάγκες που έχει η κοινωνία της χώρας μας αυτή την περίοδο. Θεωρώ λοιπόν ότι το κρίσιμο θέμα για να αντιστραφεί αυτό το κλίμα είναι να ξαναγίνει το δημόσιο σύστημα υγείας στην Ελλάδα, αλλά και στις υπόλοιπες χώρες, να ξαναγίνει πραγματικά δημόσιο, κοινωνικό και ελκυστικό και για τους ανθρώπους οι οποίοι εργάζονται και μοχθούν κάτω από πολύ αντίξωες συνθήκες, αλλά και φυσικά πιο φιλικό για τους ίδιους τους ασθενείς, να καλύπτει με αξιοπρέπεια και αξιοπιστία μεγαλύτερες ανάγκες, χωρίς την ανάγκη, την υποχρέωση μάλλον, να πληρώνουν από την τσέπη τους. Σήμερα στην Ελλάδα, αγαπητοί φίλοι και αγαπητοί σύντροφοι, είμαστε στη φάση που έχουμε λειτουργικά ανασφάλιστους πολίτες. Ο ΣΥΡΙΖΑ, που έκανε τους συμβιβασμούς του, που διαχειρίστηκε ένα μνημόνιο, έκανε μια τεράστια σημασίας κοινωνική τομή. Κάλυψε θεσμικά τους ανασφάλιστους πολίτες αυτής της χώρας. Αυτό ήταν τεράστια επένδυση στην κοινωνική συνοχή και στην αξιοπρέπεια αυτής της χώρας. Τώρα πια που δεν έχουμε θεσμικά εμπόδια, έχουμε στην πράξη εμπόδια. Στην πράξη και οι ασφαλισμένοι πολίτες και οι ανασφάλιστοι επίσης, που έχουν αποκλειστική, ας πούμε, δυνατότητα εξυπηρέτησης από τις δημόσιες δομές, στην πράξη δεν μπορούν να εξυπηρετηθούν αν δεν πληρώσουν από την τσέπη τους. Και έχουμε πάει πίσω, έχουμε γυρίσει 40 χρόνια πίσω, στις συνθήκες του ιδρυτικού νόμου του ΕΣΥ, πριν από αυτή τη μεγάλη παρέμβαση στο κοινωνικό κράτος μετά τη μεταπολίτευση, που οι άνθρωποι στη χώρα μας, για να έχουν ιατροφαρμακευτική φροντίδα, έπρεπε ή να έχουν μέσον, βουλευτές και υπουργούς, ή να έχουν λεφτά. Τώρα πρέπει να έχεις λεφτά. Νομίζω ότι αυτό είναι μια κατάσταση, πρέπει να είναι μια κατάσταση που δεν μπορούμε να συμβιβαστούμε μαζί της. Άρα πρέπει να μιλήσουμε για επανίδρυση του ΕΣΥ, όπως πολύ ωραία είπε χθες ο Γιάννης ο Καλομενίδης. Πρέπει να μιλήσουμε, όχι απλώς υπερασπιζόμαστε ένα τέτοιο ΕΣΥ, το οποίο πια, όπως αναλύθηκε χθες, έχει ανατραπεί ο αξιακός του πυρήνας. Η ιστορία της πλήρους και αποκλειστικής απασχόλησης δεν είναι κάποια συνδικαλιστική αιμονή. Το να έχει το δημόσιο σύστημα υγείας γιατρούς αφοσιωμένους στη δωρεάν φροντίδα των ασθενών, με καλές συνθήκες εργασίας, προφανώς, και με αξιοπρεπείς αμοιβές, επίσης προφανώς, αυτό πια έχει χαθεί. Και ουσιαστικά η κυβέρνηση λέει στον κόσμο, λέει στους συναδέλφους του ΕΣΥ, πάρτε τα από την τσέπη των ασθενών. Κάντε ιδιωτικό έργο μέσα στο νοσοκομείο, κάντε ιδιωτικό ιατρείο έξω από το νοσοκομείο, δουλέψτε και στις ιδιωτικές κλινικές και ταυτόχρονα ασχοληθείτε και με την τακτική λειτουργία του νοσοκομείου. Όλοι καταλαβαίνετε ποιο θα πάει πίσω από όλα αυτά. Νομίζω λοιπόν ότι είμαστε σε μια μεγάλη ανατροπή αυτού του κεκτημένου, του κοινωνικού κεκτημένου της μεταπολίτευσης, και αυτό πρέπει να συνειδητοποιηθεί ευρύτατα. Και εγώ θεωρώ ότι είναι ψηλά στην ανασφάλεια την κοινωνική και στην δυσκολία και στην ιεράρχηση των προβλημάτων που κάνει ο κόσμος. Η ακρίβεια είναι το ένα, και αν το ψάξετε, δηλαδή τα ποιοτικά στοιχεία των δημοσκοπήσεων, λένε ότι το δεύτερο στην πραγματικότητα θέμα, εκτός από το ζήτημα της διαφθοράς των θεσμών του κράτους δικαίου, το οποίο έχει έρθει στο προσκήνιο λόγω των τεμπών, το δεύτερο στην ουσία κοινωνικό πρόβλημα μείζων είναι το θέμα της περίθαλψης. Άρα δεν μπορεί η αριστερά επ' αυτού να σφυρίζει αδιάφορα. Και ή να λέει ότι πρέπει να υπερβούμε τον καπιταλισμό για να έχουμε στην πράξη κατοχυρωμένο αυτό το δικαίωμα. Το να υπάρχει αντικαπιταλιστικός ορίζοντας στην πολιτική μας είναι άλλο πράγμα. Προφανώς πρέπει να λέμε ότι τα προβλήματα αυτά είναι βαθύτερα, είναι συστημικά, έχουν σχέση με την εκμετάλλευση ανθρώπου από άνθρωπο, με τις ανισότητες, με όλα αυτά. Αλλά νομίζω ότι οφείλουμε να διαμορφώσουμε και μια εναλλακτική πολιτική στρατηγική, η οποία θα αντιμετωπίσει αυτή την κρίση. Εγώ δηλαδή θεωρώ, και θα σας πω το συγκεκριμένο παράδειγμα. Θα σας κάνω μάλλον την εξής υπόθεση. Φανταστείτε να είχαμε την πανδημία. Η πανδημία ήταν υποτίθεται το συμβάν το οποίο δημιούργησε και μια ρογμή στο νεοφιλελεύθερο αφήγημα, ότι υπερέχει ο ιδιωτικός τομέας και λοιπά, η αγορά λύνει τις λύσεις, και ανέδειξε την αξία των δημόσιων συστημάτων υγείας. Δεν εκμεταλλευτήκαμε αυτή την ευκαιρία και η αριστερά στη χώρα μας δεν το εκμεταλλεύτηκε για να διευρύνει αυτή τη ρογμή στο νεοφιλελευθερισμό, στη γραμμή του νεοφιλελεύθερου. Φανταστείτε όμως να είχαμε την πανδημία και να μην είχε προηγηθεί η κάλυψη των ανασφάλιστων στη χώρα και να μην είχε στηριχθεί όχι στο βαθμό που θα θέλαμε και στο βαθμό που απαιτούσαν οι ανάγκες, αλλά να μην είχε αυτό που χθες είπε ο Γιώργος ο Μανουσάκης από το Λασίθι, ένας νομός με δυσκολία στη λειτουργία του συστήματος υγείας, σταθεροποίηση στο σύστημα υγείας. Είπε ότι το 15 με 19 είχαμε σταθεροποίηση. Δεν είχαμε, όπως είναι η εύκολη ρητορική κάποιων πολιτικών δυνάμεων, όλοι τα ίδια κάνουνε και όλοι ιδιωτικοποιούν την υγεία. Φανταστείτε λοιπόν να μην είχε προηγηθεί αυτή η επουλωτική παρέμβαση στο σύστημα υγείας, ένα, και κυρίως φανταστείτε να είχε προλάβει η Νέα Δημοκρατία, να είχε νομοθετήσει αυτές τις αλλαγές στις εργασιακές σχέσεις των γιατρών και να είχαμε την πανδημία με τους γιατρούς του ΕΣΥ να κοιτάζουν πώς θα την κοπανίσουν από το νοσοκομείο για να πάνε να βγάλουν λεφτά δουλεύοντας ιδιωτικά. Ποιος θα ασχολιότανε με τη φροντίδα των ασθενών με COVID. Η τραγωδία που ζήσαμε θα ήταν στο τετράγωνο. Και λέω λοιπόν και καταλήγω ότι από την άποψη των αναγκών των ανθρώπων έχει καμιά φορά προφανώς ο αγώνας, η διεκδίκηση, τα κινήματα, η παρέμβαση από τα κάτω είναι πολύ σημαντική. Και αυτό έχουμε μάθει να κάνουμε όλοι μας χρόνια στην αριστερά. Αλλά πρέπει να συνειδητοποιήσουμε ότι αυτό που λέμε όλοι να είναι η υγεία δικαίωμα και όχι εμπόρευμα, κάποιες πολιτικές το εγγυώνται στην πράξη. Κάποιες κυβερνήσεις το κατοχυρώνουν ή το αναιρούν αυτό το δικαίωμα. Και τώρα έχει αναιρεθεί. Άρα λοιπόν έχει τεράστια σημασία να δούμε με ποιες δημοσιονομικές, μεταρρυθμιστικές, πολιτικές, οργανωτικές προϋποθέσεις θα μπορέσει αυτό το σύστημα υγείας να ξανασταθεί στα πόδια του και να δώσει μια προοπτική στους νέους γιατρούς, στους νέους επιστήμονες, ότι αξίζει να μείνουν στη χώρα τους, αξίζει να δουλέψουν με καλύτερες συνθήκες, αξίζει να μπορούν να προσφέρουν, να έχουν την αίσθηση αυτό που είπε χθες η Ελένη Ιωαννίδου. Στο εξαιρετικό βίντεο του που όλοι αναγνωρίσαμε ότι, για την παρέμβαση αυτή. Που είπε ότι έχασα τώρα πια, φεύγοντας από το δημόσιο σύστημα υγείας, την αίσθηση ότι προσφέρω σε αυτούς που έχουν μεγαλύτερη ανάγκη. Νομίζω ότι υπάρχει πάρα πολλοί κόσμος που θέλει αυτό το πράγμα, γιατί η ιατρική είναι εξορισμού μια ανθρωπιστική και μια κοινωνική επιστήμη και πρέπει πραγματικά με παρεμβάσεις αυτού του τύπου να μπορέσουμε να ξαναδώσουμε αυτή την προοπτική. Και βεβαίως η κρίσιμη παρέμβαση είναι η δημοσιονομική. Και τελειώνω με αυτό. Και τελειώνω με αυτό. Δεν μπορεί, βεβαίως λέμε για νέο σύστημα υγείας, θέλει θεσμικές αλλαγές, θέλει μεταρρυθμίσεις, αλλά πρέπει να είμαστε πολύ σαφείς, θέλει και νέους πόρους. Αυτό πρέπει να το πούμε και να συνειδητοποιηθεί ευρύτατα. Εάν δεν υπάρχει λοιπόν στρατηγική σύγκληση με το μέσο όρο της Ευρώπης των 27, δεν λέμε για την Ευρωζώνη, εάν δεν υπάρχει στρατηγική σύγκληση με το 7,5% του ΑΕΠ, που είναι ο μέσος όρος των δημόσιων δαπανών στην Ευρώπη αυτή την περίοδο. Δεύτερον, εάν δεν υπάρχει ανάσχεση αυτής της τάσης της πολεμικής οικονομίας και των εξοπλιστικών προγραμμάτων 25 δις στα επόμενα 10 χρόνια, δηλαδή 2,5 δις το χρόνο, 2,5 δις το χρόνο θα πληρώνει η Ελλάδα σε μια κούρσα εξοπλισμών η οποία δεν έχει στην πραγματικότητα καμία σχέση με τις ανάγκες της άμυνάς της. Και τρίτον, εάν η Ευρώπη δεν σταματήσει αυτή την τρέλα του Rearm Europe και κυρίως εάν δεν υπάρξει ρήτρα διαφυγής για τις κοινωνικές δαπάνες, για τη στήριξη των συστημάτων υγείας, για τη στήριξη των προνοιακών συστημάτων. Αναφέρθηκαν οι συνάδελφοι προηγουμένως για την κοινωνική φροντίδα, για την ανάγκη κοινωνικής φροντίδας. Έχουμε αύξηση του προσδόκιμου ζωής, έχουμε αύξηση του μέσου όρου ζωής των ανθρώπων, που έχουν συνοσυρώτες, που έχουν πολλά προβλήματα. Αυξάνονται αυτές καινούριες ανάγκες. Πώς θα χρηματοδοτηθούν όλα αυτά? Νομίζω ότι είμαστε σε ένα κομβικό σημείο και για τη χώρα μας και για την Ευρώπη και η αριστερά οφείλει να είναι παρούσα, να έχει άποψη και να έχει και πρόταση για τη συγκυρία. Σας ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ.
Ευχαριστούμε πολύ, Andrea. Thank you very much. We have now time for, I think, 20 minutes for discussion, and I would suggest to ask the questions on trade unionizing afterwards, after the second round, and now all the other questions you may have. So I think we are sampling some. Who has a question or a remark? Somebody?
I would like to ask whether there is a difference in the... is it okay to ask for trade unions now, or is it okay? Okay. Is there a difference between the immigrants, the people working abroad, and the locals in the different countries that you are representing? I mean, are they part of the unions, also the immigrants working on the different countries, in at least the sample that we have here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say overwhelmingly our affiliates are actively organizing immigrant workers. It's, you know, I think there are some things that when there's newly an immigrant workforce to a sector, I think there's some learning that the union needs to go through to understand how to connect with immigrant workers, because sometimes their concerns, their fears, their previous experiences with unions may be different. And so it's important to build trust. I think, the most successful unions are ones who are able to use members from the community, from the immigrant community, to do that outreach and build that trust and build those immigrant communities into the leadership of the union, so that those workers feel that their voice, their interests, their concerns, their fears are represented.
Can I add?
Please.
Okay, so I would say that in Croatia, at least, the situation is different because we are at this new stage where unions are still trying to figure out what to do. We do have a couple of good examples, not in health. They're actually from the construction workers union, who did a really nice job at recognizing that there was a large number of people coming in, that they needed support, and that they have to adapt. So the union had to adapt how they worked in order to communicate well with the people. And this was, if I'm being honest, it was quite a surprise, because what we saw is that the other unions, especially the big trade union confederations, they were like frozen when they saw migrant workers coming in. They just tended to block it out. So it was too much for them to process. And I don't mean it in a nice way. I think that they failed miserably at something that they do have the resources in the infrastructure to do. But I would say that what we are facing now is that, in addition to these good examples, there is increasing talk about the importance of organizing migrant workers in left circles. And this is, it's good, but it's also possibly a problem because it's a very sexy topic. So now everybody's talking about migrant workers, how it's important to organize them. It's not so sexy work when you start doing it. So it's quite difficult, and it makes, if you do it right, I think it forces you to come out of your comfort zone, and it means it's not just workplace organizing anymore. So you have to be ready to go out and go to the mosque, and it's not something that many people on the left are ready to do. So it's also, it has a lot to do about learning about new people, about, what are their needs, about also listening to them. It's not only about projecting what you know that other workers need on them.
In Poland, we have immigrants in our union, and they have full rights of union members, but it's not easy to join them, to organize them, because they don't understand what it is really for. And when we say to Ukrainian caregiver, let's join our union, she answers, but what for? For better wages. But I will work for 300 hours a month or 400 hours a month, and that's okay, I will earn more money. So that's the problem, and we need to build the awareness, and we need to do this education about about workers' rights, and the immigrants' workers' rights are the same as Polish workers.
Yeah, short. We have just had strikes in the public hospitals and have learned that we have to provide informations in the native languages we didn't have, and find colleagues who are willing to get involved and persuade their colleagues to join in. And they have to speak themselves too. And in our trade union work groups at the hospital, we are still very German, but now it's changing.
Yeah. You need a microphone, please, for the translators. Okay, and then Katrin.
I would like to ask, are there published data showing the immigrant unions, which countries how many, let's say Germany, with what other countries do they, your social workers or health workers migrate to? But all over Europe, not only now we hear about Russia, Germany, Poland. Is there somewhere that we can find information regarding this cross-talk between countries?
Dana, you know? No. As far as I know from Germany, for the doctors, we have these numbers. Every year, the doctors' chamber, because a doctor who wants to work in Germany has to resign something in the doctors' chamber. So we know the numbers of doctors coming from foreign countries exactly from every country.
Just for Germany. In Germany, working 1,700,000 nurses, and German nationality is 1,400,000, and the others are international citizenship. And from the EU, with Switzerland and Great Britain, are 93,000. And non-EU countries are 155,000 about. Yeah, from non-EU hospitals, from the non-EU. And there are an unknown number of undeclared jobs.
I mean, okay, so for Croatia it would be the same about Germany. The professional chambers would have their own statistics. But I think maybe looking at some of the latest WHO Europe publications that deal with health workforce migration might be useful. It's probably not like very nicely broken down, but maybe it points out to some trends or additional sources that can be useful. But yeah.
Okay. Katrin, you had a question?
One of the main issues of trade unions is organizing workers for striking for better working conditions. How far is that a problem in a sector where people are working for the good of other people and take care for people who cannot help themselves? And what strategies do you have to overcome this problem?
That's exactly the question for the next round. Please wait some minutes before we close this and then talking about the issue of trade unionizing and organizing. So maybe another aspect as Boris said, I'm working for the Democratic Doctors Association, and when the German Minister of Labor, Hubertus Heil, wanted to go to Brazil to make a massive recruitment of nurses in Brazil, we're a quite small left-wing association, got in contact with our comrades in Brazil, and we published a paper in German, in English, and in Portuguese, telling the people what they will expect and what Hubertus Heil did not say to them. That's all what you said. Their professions will not be accepted. They will be hired as non-skilled nurses for years. They will have bad working conditions, and that the people who live in Germany do not want to work there, but now they are recruiting other staff. And I don't know whether it was our influence, I suppose not, but a half year later, the new government in Brazil stopped this project, and no Brazilian nurse ever came to Germany on the ticket of this recruitment. So that's also a thing we have to take care of. I know that the employees of the Charité made a delegation, I think, to Bosnia-Herzegovina in 2015 when the Charité wanted to recruit people from Bosnia. So was heißt Betriebsrat? The Work Council of the Charité decided to go to Bosnia-Herzegovina to talk with their colleagues there, to talk with the trade unions there, to deal together with this problem. So, and we have to keep this in mind, that when they are planning such things, we have to talk internationally. We have to find comrades somewhere to tell them what will they expect for us in Germany, in Poland, in Croatia, and somewhere else.
I would just add to that, I think, because we do see, I mentioned the Australia visa program as kind of a best practice, but we also see worse practices. And, I think it gets worse the lower level of skill, because, it used to be that the migrant workers were primarily doctors and nurses, but now the short staffing is for all sectors of the healthcare sector. So lower skilled caregivers, nurses, aides are being actively recruited, and the UK has a visa program that is incredibly precarious, that provides only where the visa is tied to the job. It's short term, and so when it ends, they're required to go back home. There is no opportunity for reunification or even to move to a separate job. And there's been increasingly cases uncovered of what's akin to human trafficking, where people are having their passports taken. They're being told that if they complain, they'll be sent back home. If they make any, they're being forced to live in housing provided by the nursing homes. It's really terrible conditions. And so we do have to pay very close attention to these bilateral visa arrangements to make sure that they protect workers' rights.
Okay, thank you. So we'll stop this round now.